Hello and welcome back to The Independent Pianist. This is your host, Cole Anderson, as usual. Sorry I wasn't posting last week. I just got kind of overwhelmed with work and with preparing for my concert that's coming up in a couple of weeks on November the 5th. That concert is going to be live streamed, so I'll be posting a link at some point here for if you want to actually see the live stream. If you can, come in person as well. It's going to be at the San Francisco Conservatory, 7:30 p.m., November the 5th, Sunday, in the Hume Concert Hall. Today we have another one of Ferruccio Busoni's marvelous transcriptions from Bach's organ works, Nun komm der Heiden, Heiland. And I've actually covered one of these a couple weeks back, so we've already been kind of going into this style a little bit. This particular chorale prelude is one of Bach's greatest works, in my opinion. The previous chorale prelude that we covered was much simpler in structure than this one. This is actually very elaborate and very florid in Bach's use of embellishments. The hymn tune, the Lutheran hymn, which is the basis for the cantata and also for the chorale prelude, is very, very freely set in the soprano voice, the highest voice in the texture. And I mean very freely. Basically, the procedure that Bach uses is that each phrase of the hymn is in 4 phrases. Each phrase is kind of suggested. So the first few notes will be present and that outline will be suggested, but then Bach will kind of continue in the same vein and go somewhere totally new. He's not slavishly bound to the original phrase outlines. And it's really marvelous the kind of imagination that he uses, how he fills in between these notes and how he continues and does something really unique. So I want to illustrate this process a little bit because it's kind of abstract. It might be a little hard to hear if you don't have it really clearly pointed out to you. So first, I'm going to play the entire chorale tune without any harmonization, so just single notes. All right, so we're going to zoom in on the first phrase. So in Bach's version, on the score, I've marked some notes to show when Bach reaches the notes of the original hymn and how he's kind of circling around these notes and departing from them. Now, before this first phrase setting in this chorale prelude, there's also a little prelude section in which you don't have the soprano, the melody voice, you just have the alto, tenor, and bass voices. And Busoni marks these things very appropriately to be played in an undertone. You know, on the organ, all this material would be played on different keyboards from the theme, and any organist worth their salt is going to use some kind of different registration, some different set of pipes, so that the theme will really stick out from the texture. And that's exactly what Busoni marks for the performer to do as well. But the wonderful thing about this little prelude from a thematic standpoint is that it's full of allusions to the hymn. So it starts with this walking bass line, which is simple but very, very striking. And that in itself is a presentiment of the start of the second phrase of the hymn, which has the same ascending notes. Meanwhile, the alto and tenor voices are suggesting the opening fourth interval from the hymn, and these fourths are further developed. You know, when Bach starts elaborating the first phrase, he keeps this idea of rising fourths and develops it. So after each phrase of the hymn is set, there's also an interlude in the same kind of character as the prelude, and these also contain lots of allusions to the hymn. And it's really remarkable how elements of the hymn become integrated into every aspect of the texture. So just for example, here is the third phrase of the hymn, and as Bach sets this third phrase, he leaves out the descent from D to B. D to B is filled in with the note C in the original hymn. Bach leaves it out, but he includes it an eighth note earlier and sped up in the tenor voice. These little details are absolutely inspired. It just points towards how deeply Bach had subsumed the character of the theme into every element of the composition. So it gives you the impression that Bach is just kind of improvising on this hymn tune in a very, very free way, but elements of the tune are just seeping into the structure very, very naturally, and it's just suffused with the character of this hymn. Probably the most extraordinary moment in the piece is the coda. In the coda, Bach really outdoes himself. He kind of spirals off into a very moving filigree, totally extra from what was in the original hymn, but extremely beautiful and powerful. And this kind of outpouring of emotion is inspired by his arrival on what's called the Picardy third. This is when you're in a minor key, but you arrive on a major chord on the tonic instead of a minor chord. So Busoni's transcription is very respectful, very clever in how he fits the four voices into two hands. The organist has two hands and his feet to play the bass line, but we have to do everything just with two hands. He does take one very daring liberty in the last few measures. As you might have noticed when I just played that part for you, he marks an enormous ritenuto, slowing down of the tempo, which is not in Bach's original. It's not unreasonable to suppose that musicians would slow down at the end of pieces or at phrase endings, so it's a very natural marking, but it is stretched over a very long period of time, much longer than most people probably would dare in a performance. This is very strikingly reminiscent of Busoni's own performance approach when playing Bach. We only have one recording of him playing a Bach work. That's the C major Prelude and Fugue from the first book of the Well-Tempered Clavier. In that recording, Busoni does take some extraordinary liberties with tempo, which are nonetheless very logical, but he's really quite daring in how much time he takes. So of course, this is a matter of personal opinion. You should be aware that this is not in Bach's original, so you don't necessarily have to slow down like this. I personally think it works very, very well. You're not going to hear very many people on the organ play it like this. I've never heard anyone actually do this, but given the extraordinarily powerful emotional effect of these last few bars, I think lingering over the notes is actually very effective and very reasonable. So again, I think it's just Busoni kind of showing us a possible performance style for this ending. And of course, I'm sure he assumed that the intelligent musician would have checked the original and would know that it was added, and so therefore could be discarded if you didn't want to do that. I think it's really amazing. There are so many circular melodic shapes, so many spirals and goings and returnings in this music, and I always think that this might relate to this line of text in the original hymn. The text is by Martin Luther, I believe. So in the fourth verse, you get the words, "From the Father, forth he came, and returneth to the same." So there's this kind of circular motion always, this kind of eternal motion. That's part of this whole timeless kind of eternal beauty that the music has. And it really doesn't matter if you are a Lutheran or if you hold religious views at all similar with Bach, or if you hold religious views at all. I think that the wonder that the music inspires is universal, and it's really the wonder that we all sometimes feel when we're just faced with the mysteries and beauties of the universe. It's very vast and impossible to fathom, and this music is kind of that. For me, it's kind of that in microcosm. And also, I think this version for piano is really justified. It brings out certain qualities in the music which you don't hear on the organ, a certain intimacy, a certain subtlety that might not necessarily be on the organ, even though, of course, the organ original is amazing as well. It's this kind of quality of transcriptions to reveal different aspects of a work, which I think really makes them worth our time when they're really good, like this one. So please enjoy the complete performance coming up in a second here. Please also support the channel if you can. Patreon.com is a great way to do that. You can also just click the like button and the subscribe button. And catch me live at San Francisco Conservatory. That's November 5th, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time in the Hume Recital Hall. If you can make it, that'd be fantastic. But at all events, just stay tuned. Next week I'll have some more great music and conversation for you. So until then, take care, and till next time.